According to Oxford Languages, the world's leading dictionary publisher, a noob is a person who is inexperienced in a particular sphere or activity, especially computing or gaming. According to me, every role-playing game is only as good as the people playing it. And that's why every single person who says 5e sucks is a noob. D&D YouTubers complaining about 5e are noobs. I don't care how long you've been playing, they're noobs. Before anyone accuses me of being a WotC lover, you should know, a lot of people can remember the worst day of their life. For me, it was when I woke up paralyzed in a hospital bed after a deadly injury. But prior to that, it was the day I learned that WotC had purchased D&D. Furthermore, when I first started playing 5e D&D, I quickly became disappointed that I had put so much money into it and not Pathfinder. In fact, I even jokingly teased my good friend Doug, who is a Pathfinder GM, that I was angry at him for allowing me to invest my money into 5e rather than Pathfinder. And for the first year or two of playing 5e, I really had that negative opinion regarding it. The fact is, 5th edition D&D is closer to this than this. And I loved AD&D. I DM'd AD&D from 1980 until 2000 when we switched to 3rd edition. I loved this Marvel game, but it's not necessarily what I'm looking for from D&D. Superhero D&D isn't really where I'm coming from. Contrary to how much shade I throw at that game we're all supposed to call 4th edition D&D, it's not a bad game. It's just not D&D. And that's not some angry old grognard's opinion. The people who made that game literally went out of their way to make sure it wasn't D&D. They didn't just change the rules, they even changed a lot of the long-established lore, which, I gotta tell you, is particularly annoying when I'm making a lore video. I believe that had they called it something other than 4th edition D&D, it would still be going strong. Wargaming rules from other companies have shown that. It's not a bad game, it's just not D&D. If 4th edition is your favorite edition of D&D, then you don't actually like D&D. But 4e isn't a bad game, and that's just your personal taste, which is totally fine. Because I had already invested so much into 5th edition, I kept playing. And the longer I played, I came to understand it wasn't the game that sucked, it was me. First off, it's not made for people like me. It's not made for people who have been playing D&D for 4 decades. It's made to attract more players into the hobby, since old school games like AD&D present a significant challenge to new players. The mortality rate in older games doesn't appeal to a broad audience, at least not at first. And that's because those old games of the OSR revolution are deadly, meaning it's really easy for DMs to create challenging encounters. It's harder for players to stay alive. The opposite is true of 5e, where characters are super durable. With the OSR games, us grognard DMs became lazy. Really, because the emphasis was placed on player skills, not the DM. The opposite is true of 5e. And that just means 5e DMs need to work harder. They need to be more imaginative. And we can no longer be lazy, expecting the game mechanics to do all the work for us. A game master's job is to create obstacles. It is not a game master's job to consider how players might overcome those obstacles. And it isn't even our job to create balanced obstacles. Players will be the sole arbiters of how to proceed. Not every obstacle can be overcome. Some are best avoided. Some might be role-playing social interactions. Some might be winnable fights, while others still may necessitate retreat. I cannot stress this enough. Game masters need to create the occasional obstacle that can't be overcome through typical combat. That's an important lesson for 5e players to learn. Here's a big mistake the 5e sucks noob DMs are making. They forget that adversaries within the game world know how durable 5e heroes are, and therefore those adversaries would develop challenges and tactics to overcome that. That's just the reality of their imaginary world. This then becomes the responsibility of the experienced game master to translate that into the obstacles. Here's a few simple examples of my own. In one boss fight, my player characters had to defeat a mummy lord in his not very large throne room As soon as they entered, the walls all erupted in flames. That's a pretty big hint this mummy was going to be immune to fire. It also means characters couldn't get near the walls. After the initial round of combat, players realized the mummy was immune to all damage. How do you kill something that's immune to all forms of damage? Well, the floor of the chamber was strewn with vases, pottery, and if a character looks carefully, they might notice some canopic jars during this encounter. After a couple rounds of that mummy lord harming the PCs while taking no damage itself, one player correctly guessed they needed to destroy the mummy's canopic jars, which led them to discover the jar hidden in the back of the room, which had the mummy's heart. It was only after destroying that would the mummy take damage. In worlds where creatures understand how durable the heroes who come to slay them are, those monsters will develop similar defensive tactics. All it takes is an imaginative DM to think like those monsters and create encounters accordingly. Another recent encounter occurred as my players explored a swamp covered in green, sickly mist. Their mission is to hunt down and slay undead versions of themselves from an alternate timeline where they failed to defeat the final boss. They encountered the undead barbarian revenant of one player, and at the beginning of each of that undead creature's turns, it regained all of its hit points. Not that players knew this, as one player literally blurted out, "Why?" But it was the green mist regenerating the undead horror. A simple gust of wind spell could have stopped it. That combat actually caused our session to go long because they couldn't do enough damage in a single round until after a lucky initiative roll, they finally developed a tactic that destroyed it. And I wish I could tell you about what I have planned for our next session because I think it's my best idea ever, but some of my players might actually watch this. So remember, the DM need only create challenges that compete with the rules that give so many advantages to PCs. And that's difficult for noob DMs, which is why noob DMs think 5e sucks. But it doesn't. It's just another game in a long line of games, and it happens to be enjoying some popularity at the moment. Still not convinced? You still believe insert name of game here is better? Well, take that game of yours, give it the player base that 5e has, and you know what? It wouldn't take long before all you ever heard from everyone is how much that game sucked. Nobody can show me a perfect role-playing game because it doesn't exist. Critical Role and MCDM are trying to create the perfect role-playing game. And bless their little hearts for trying, but they'll all fail if they don't understand it isn't perfect dice mechanics that draws us to play a particular game. At least not for most of us. It's the setting, the lore. It's all the trappings around those dice mechanics. It's the world where the game takes place. And every single new and improved dice mechanic is really just a derivative of something that's already been done. So all of those new creators need to invent a rich, fantastic setting with amazing lore to have a truly successful game in the long run. If you don't believe me, just ask the literally thousands of previous aspiring game designers from the past 50 years. The degree to which 5e sucks really just seems to be proportional to the number of new people coming into the hobby, repeating things noob DMs say on YouTube. Or maybe you've been playing for decades and believe one of the earlier editions of D&D is best. But is it though? Is it really? I loved AD&D, but I also remember just how many house rules we needed to make it playable. Even Gary Gygax didn't follow the published rules for first edition AD&D, and he's the guy who largely created them. It's also very important to remember that memories of youth shouldn't be confused with memories of game mechanics. I loved AD&D, but you know what? I also loved being young and having few responsibilities in life. It's common for old people to confuse those feelings of youth with memories of a particular event, place, or thing. Second edition AD&D was great, but so was being a stupid 20-year-old. Finally, unless we're talking about a specific name monster like a demon prince, archdevil, deity, and so on, every monster in every book is just a template for the most common lowly rank and file version of that monster. They are the minions. I did a review for the 3-volume set for Monster Manual Expanded, and those books are fantastic. And I hear MCDM's Flee Mortals is great. But you know what? Those books are not necessary. and are only doing what every experienced game master should already be doing, taking that rank and file version and spicing it up for your own game. Really, it's okay. You're allowed to change anything and everything to make your games as unique as you and your adventures are. 5th edition D&D isn't perfect, far from it. There's plenty of things I have issues with, but no game is perfect, and switching games is really just switching problems. I believe it's very important to support other games and other game designers, but don't do it because you think 5e sucks. That's the easy noob way out. Do it to experience different games and improve your gaming chops. And maybe do it to support independent game designers. Maybe to protest WotC. I can tell who all the new players are because they're the ones complaining about WotC, as if they just realized that's a corporation willing to burn D&D to the ground as they chase profits. I hope we can stop giving into the mass hysteria of "this game sucks!" and instead put the focus and responsibility back where it belongs, on our own creativity. If you're still having trouble with character durability, just get rid of character death saves. We all changed 0 hit point rules for AD&D, and you're allowed to do that for 5e too. Death saves might still exist for special circumstances, but otherwise, just decide that at 0 hit points, a NPC or monster is unconscious. At negative hit points, they're bleeding out, 1 hit point per round. At -10 or -10 plus their con bonus, or at a negative equal to their con total, they then die. Make that one little change to the rules and your 5e games will push the difficulty back towards previous editions. Wait. Remember earlier when I said the perfect role-playing game doesn't exist? I need to amend that. The perfect role-playing game does exist. It's the one you enjoy most. Everyone can argue about dice mechanics, settings, game creators, and publishers, but in the end, it comes down to what you enjoy most, and that's the perfect role-playing game. Even if it's the game we're supposed to call 4th edition. As always, I'm your host Atten here at We Love TTRPGs, and don't let yourself suck, just get better. I hope this video has opened up your mind to limitless possibilities in gaming, and I appreciate your support by liking this video and telling me in the comments how much of a weird looking idiot I am. Thanks so much for watching.
What you mean it come that way?